We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to AVRant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H.
Fab. Okay, we got some picture for this one too. Those will be coming up in a second here. Now, we talked about him last week. First up, Fab put his new SVS PC12 Plus subwoofer in the spot where he normally has his PB1000. The PC12 Plus definitely works just fine. So there's no defect with it. He's still very confused about why it sounds quieter, though, and how to best set it up. Now, if you remember last week, he said he got this new sub, he set it up, and it sounds quieter. And we said put it in the other spot because it's probably just based on where you're sitting in the location, and that's it.
But he was worried that there might be a defect with the thing itself, so I suggested put it where you've got your other sub that you know works. Just play it by itself. He did that. He's like, yep, it works, so not defective. That's good.
So, he tried watching some movies at moderate volumes as other people were in their house, and he did this with just the PB1000 and then with just the PC12 Plus. Both were used in the same position to the left of his TV, to his surprise. The PC12 Plus sounded quieter. He says it sounded tighter and punchier, and that the PB1000 sounded a bit boomier, but to his ears, the PB1000 sounded louder as well. Shouldn't the PC12 Plus blow the PB1000 out of the water, or maybe hear the difference he expects if we were really cranking the volume? First of all, if you were level matching these subwoofers with the rest of your speakers, it shouldn't sound louder, you know?
Well, no, but it could, because if the PB1000 is producing a bit more distortion, and if he's saying, you know what, it sounds a little looser and boomier, that's distortion.
That could be it. But what I'm saying, as an overall thing, you just turning, I mean, if you're level matching this, then it should not sound louder. It should sound the same volume. Now, if there's a difference in volumes, perceived volumes, then you start looking to what Rob was just talking about, which is why. Why is there this perception of a different volume when these subs are at the same relative volumes to each other? They are level matched. I level matched into my speakers.
Same SPL,
That's
same
right.
sound pressure level, but one perceptually sounds louder. And that can be the case when there's more distortion. Our brain interprets distortion as loud. So you can measure the sound pressure level, the actual sound pressure level, as being equal. But if one source has more distortion in it than the other, we will perceive the more distorted one as being louder.
That's right.
So that could very much be the case. It sounds like it from the other aspects of the sound that he described. So when you're saying, shouldn't the PC12 Plus blow the PB1000 out of the water? Well, it can play about 6 decibels louder.
Yes.
At maximum, though. And you were saying you weren't listening to this anywhere near max. In fact, you had the volume at just a moderate volume. So you're not going to hear any difference. Ideally, you would hear no difference at all. They'd be the same. If you turned it up as loud as they can go, the PC12 Plus will go 6 decibels louder, which is perceptually twice as loud. So that's where you would hear the difference, but you're not getting there. You're not getting towards that max headroom at all. So what you could do, of course, is goose the PC12 Plus. You could turn its volume up higher, make it, not level matched, and it has the headroom to do that, whereas the PB1000 might reach its maximum volume and then have nowhere left to go. But as far as they were both the same SPL, but the PB1000 sounded louder, I would attribute that to it having more distortion. Because you're trying to fill a very large space. Even at a moderate volume, you're attempting to fill a very large space, which means that
it's not just the theater, it's all that house.
It's the kitchen, dining room, foyer, all of it together. So, you're asking it to output quite a bit of sound pressure. And I have no doubt that the PB1000 is perhaps distorting where the PC12 Plus is not. Yes. And that's what you're perceiving as being
And as we've said with SVS, is it's distorting because it's trying to do what you're asking it to do, but it's not going to go to push itself to the point where it breaks.
Yeah, okay. But the cabinet is starting to make some noise. The port is starting to make some noise.
I would bet that port is probably 90% of your problem right there, to be honest with you. All right, he tried to level match the subwoofers manually, but all he has to measure is a cheap SPL meter that from Amazon that doesn't include C weighting anywhere on it. When he tried to use that SPL meter, he made sure his Yamaha receiver was set to 0 dB on the master volume. Then he played the test tones out of each subwoofer one at a time, and he had to turn their volume dials almost all the way up before they even got close to 75 dB. Thoughts? Yeah, thoughts
If
are
you don't
it's
have C
using
weighting, that's a problem.
it's your problem right there. Is you're using A weighting, and yes, that's exactly
Yeah.
what you would expect to happen. So stop that to start with,
Yeah.
because you
A weighting has a filter below 500 hertz. All right.
yeah,
If from 500 hertz on down, there's a fairly steep filter on an A weighted SPL meter, which, if it's a cheap, doesn't give you the option for anything. It will be A weighted because A weighting actually mimics human hearing a little bit better at about 65 decibels,
right.
which is, certainly normal speaking volume. In fact, it's on the louder end of speaking volume, but it's not home theater volume.
No.
And at that level, our ability to hear bass is greatly diminished down at 65 dB. In fact, there are very low bass notes that you might not hear at all, which is exactly what A weighting will tell you. It's like, yeah, there's a bass note playing, but you can't hear it, so I'm not going to show it on your A weighted SPL meter. But you want to see it, so you need a meter that can do C weighting. Z weighting would be even better if you could do it, because Z weighting is no weighting; it's just a flat line.
So after doing this manual level matching that way, he then ran YPow and set all of its speakers to plus dB values, but set subwoofers to really low dB values. So basically, it level matched everything. It tried to level match the subwoofers, but then the subwoofers got basically bumped way down. Why? Because he had jacked the volume way up. Yeah. So he's trying to compensate.
Tried to manually. So he had turned the volume dials on the subs themselves way up because he was trying to manually level match them with an A weighted SPL meter. So that kind of makes sense.
It's also said the subwoofer distances that's being much further away than their physical distances from the seats. So we'd like to know if you should manually adjust that. No.
No.
You should not manually adjust the distances, because when we're setting subwoofers, think of that delay. Basically, it's a delay.
Yeah, I wish they would stop calling it distance. Although, it makes sense for the speakers because you can measure that with a tape measure and enter it yourself.
The subwoofer, it's really the delay from the time that it asks the subwoofer to make the sound to the time it measures the sound. It's a delay. So by changing that distance, it is changing when the sound is coming out from the subwoofer. Okay?
Yeah.
So if you think it's showing it much further away, what it means is it's playing it a little bit earlier than it's playing everything else. So the sound arrives at your ear at the same time. If you change it to be the physical distance, you will be making that you'll be increasing your perceived delay. The subwoofer will be coming in a little bit later than it should. So don't touch it. First of all, trust YPow. Can we go back to that? Yeah. Let's just stop with this SPL meter and stuff and trust YPow. Trust that.
And it's giving him like -10, -11, which means it's
maxed
at
out.
Its limits.
It's still too loud.
So you need to start turning the volume dial on the subwoofer down when you start getting readings like that.
Yes. So when he watched a movie after doing this, with the YPow settings, the bass sounded really quiet. So what should he do? He just wants to be impressed and happy with his bass.
But keep in mind, he's listening at moderate volume levels. And this Yamaha does not have YPow volume, which is very similar to Odyssey dynamic EQ.
Right.
So it doesn't have the thing where it's compensating for the non-linear human hearing. So what I was just saying there about the whole thing of hearing at 65 dB, let's say you've turned your master volume down to -20 on the master volume dial, which would be totally normal. Maybe you've turned it down to -30.
Right.
But -20 is really common. Lots of people listen at -20.
I listen to many things at -20. I listen to many things at -25 and -30.
Sure. So -20 would mean that the majority of the movie is supposed to be playing at 85 dB. -20 means the majority of the movie is now playing at 65 dB, which for a lot of people is a very comfortable volume at home. That totally makes sense. But it also means that the bass got turned down by 20 dB too, which means that bass that used to be playing at 85 dB in the original signal, when you had the volume dial to set to 0 dB, reference volume, totally audible, turned down by 20 dB. Now that bass is playing at 65 dB. Like I just said, you literally will not hear it. That's your human hearing.
Yeah.
That's not the system not playing it. That a microphone can pick it up. Your human hearing will not even perceive it. That's why there are the things like Odyssey Dynamic EQ, or now the newer Yamaha receivers have YPow volume, which uses something called the equal loudness curves. Or what's the other name for those? The Fletcher-Munson curves?
Yeah.
Right? Which were the studies done of the relative curves of human hearing where this sound played at this decibel level, this particular frequency, sounds about equally as loud as this lower note played at a significantly higher decibel. That's it needs to be that much louder just for your brain to perceive it as being equal. So I really think that's what's going on
That's
here.
definitely part of it, but I think
Yeah.
we kind of touched on it last time. I mean, you've got such a really non-optimal setup that going on here that you're really going to be you're going to struggle with this a little bit. It's going to take some moving things around. Now, he's got this picture here of where he wants to put these subwoofers, and he's basically begging us to say yes, it's okay to put those subwoofers there. This is where he wants to put them. And you put them wherever you want, man. We're not going to stop you, but you are sitting right on a wall, and your entire house, basically this entire floor, is basically your home theater. Think of the whole thing as your home theater, which means
Yeah.
shoving them both in the right corner. If it was just one big open room and you said, okay, I want to put one of my subwoofers smack dab in the middle of the room and one of my subwoofers in the back right corner, is that okay? You don't have to ask us that question. You know that what we would say. We would say no. You want to put them in opposing corners. Why do you want to put one in the middle of the room? But that's what you're doing, basically, and that's okay. If if that's only locations that you have, now you will have to deal with the repercussions of that, and the repercussions are that you may be sitting in a big fat null. The fact that you've got quieter bass is not a negative. It's not. You're placing a lot of importance on this, and you're thinking that turning up the volume of the subwoofer will help. It will eventually help, but you don't have enough subwoofer to fill this space up the way that you want it to do at any volume level. You just don't. You need a much bigger subwoofer because you've got so much space. So by doing what Rob says, listening at reference volumes, even if it's just get everybody out of the house on a Saturday afternoon, jack the volume knob, level match all the speakers, level match the subwoofers, let Wipeout do its thing. Make sure that when it sets the volume on the subwoofers at some place closer to 0 than closer to -11 or -10.
Yeah, try to get it like within plus or minus 3 dB would be a nice.
That's where I shoot.
If it comes out at -2, that's fine. You don't have to touch the volume dial on the subwoofer itself. -2 is a fine reading.
Then kick everybody out of the house. Jack your volume to reference volume 0 dB on your dial.
Yeah.
Then listen. Then tell me your bass is quieter. Okay,
Right.
If that's the case, then it's time to start playing with placement as much as you can. No matter what you do with placement, you're still having issues, then you have to start playing with phase. You're going to take one subwoofer, which will probably be in the back right corner, leave it alone, and take the other subwoofer and start slowly adjusting the phase knob or changing the distance half. I think usually meters are a little bit more. Usually you have more fine control over meters than you do over feet.
Sometimes
it depends on which receiver you are. Whichever one gives you the finest control, that's what you have to do. And you're listening at this point to sweeps. You're not listening to movies. You're listening to sweeps.
And the sweep should sound even in volume. If you have it turned all the way up to reference volume, and you play that bass sweep, it should sound even all the way from the top of the sweep down to the bottom, even to your human ear. It should sound even if you're all the way up at full reference volume. That's the goal. Now, nothing says that your personal taste might not like a little extra.
That's fine.
Because that is totally
But that's
normal.
not where we're at yet. We're not there
Not
yet.
We want to confirm that you're getting even accurate bass at full reference volume, because that's what Wipeout is setting. Wipeout is saying if you're at full reference volume and I play a sweep from the top down to the bottom, everything should sound equal.
Right.
Nothing should be louder or quieter throughout that sweep. And once you've achieved that, then you can start tuning to taste. Then you can start saying, you know what? I always listen at -20 dB and I don't have Wipeout volume or Odyssey dynamic EQ. That means I will manually increase my subwoofer volume at that point.
Yes.
Because I know I'm not listening at 0 dB on my volume dial. I'm listening at -20 all the time. And that's fine. We have zero issue with you doing that.
But right now, basically what you're doing, unfortunately, and it's not your fault, but what you're doing.
I love this question because this is pointing out this is the intuitive thinking. I bought a much bigger sub. I'm expecting it to sound louder right away. Why doesn't it? And so that's what we're going through.
So, but it's like it's like buying a sports car and then driving it in a residential neighborhood and saying it doesn't feel faster.
Right.
You know,
No.
you gotta let it open up, and to do that, you have to go to full reference volume and listen to it, listen to your other subwoofer, do all the tests you've already done, but that full reference volume, and then start moving things around. Now, just to back up a little bit, the reason why we start playing with phase as the very last option is because what we're now trying to do is trying to essentially modify the quote unquote location of your subwoofer within your space to give you evener bass. Now, we can't tell you what setting that would be. We have no idea. No, I don't even think there's a program that's been written that can calculate it for you. You literally have to do it one click at a time on the dial, one adjustment at a time, and listen and listen and listen, and then agonize over it, listen some more. And that's just, unfortunately, that's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. So, step one, put your subs where you want them to be. Don't ask us. Don't look for our permission.
Yeah, because you can kind of brute force this.
Put them where you want them
to be. You have
be,
SVS subs,
where
they have
it's going to
fully
make your
variable
wife
phase.
and you happiest, or your family, or whatever, your cats. I don't know. And play. Get everybody out of the house. Put it at full reference volume, and listen. Okay, you can do sweeps. You can. The first thing I would do if I were you is just put on a movie that starts off real loud with a lot of big booms, and then see where you're at. See where you're at right there. Then, if you're happy with what you're hearing at that point, walk away. Walk away.
Yeah.
Just turn the volume down to what you would normally be listening to, and say to yourself, now the bass sounds awfully quiet. All right. Go into your settings and bump up the bass, 3 dB, 4 dB, 5 dB. Doesn't matter. Bump it up a little bit right there in the settings. That's why you have this kind of wiggle room. But then just realize that if you do start to listen to a movie and you want it to be at reference volume, you need to take it back down again.
You need to turn it back down. That's right.
Because these subs are not going to keep up. And also remember, there's only so much these subs can do in this space. This is a lot of room for them to fill up, and they're doing the best they can. I'm not surprised that the PB1000 is distorting, trying to give you what you want. And I'm not surprised that the PC12 Plus isn't. As much at least. All right. Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.